The wind came howling across the plains like it was angry at the world. It rattled the cabin walls, clawed at the door, and carried a cold so sharp it felt alive. Somewhere in that darkness, a soft knock broke through the storm, hesitant, desperate, human. The cowboy froze, heart pounding, knowing that whatever waited outside would change his night forever. He hadn't planned to open the door. He hadn't planned to trust a stranger. But kindness has a way of showing up when you least expect it, asking only one question: what kind of person will you choose to be right now? Before the story continues, take a moment to support Soul Tales. If stories like this move you, inspire you, or remind you of the good still left in the world, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps keep these stories of kindness alive. The cowboy's name was Thomas Reed. Folks around the nearby town called him quiet, even cold, but the truth was simpler. Life had taught him to keep his heart guarded. Years earlier, a harsh winter had taken his wife and newborn son. Since then, Thomas lived alone in a small wooden cabin, miles from town, where silence felt safer than hope. That night, the temperature had dropped fast. The sky was a heavy blanket of black, and the moon hid behind thick clouds. Thomas had just finished feeding the fire when the knock came again. 3 soft taps, almost lost in the wind. He stood still, listening. Another knock followed, weaker this time. He grabbed his coat and opened the door just a crack. Standing there was a native woman wrapped in a thin, worn shawl. Snow clung to her dark hair, and her hands trembled as she held them close to her chest. Her eyes met his, not with fear, but with exhaustion. "Sir," she said, her voice barely louder than the wind, "may I sleep in your cabin? It's freezing outside." Thomas hesitated. The world had not always been kind to him, and he had learned to be cautious. He looked past her into the empty darkness, then back at her worn shoes and shaking shoulders. She didn't look dangerous. She looked cold. She looked tired. She looked like someone who had nowhere else to go. "Just for the night," she added quickly. "I'll leave before sunrise. I don't want trouble." Something in her words cracked the wall around his heart. Thomas stepped aside and opened the door wider. "Come in," he said, "before you freeze." Warm air rushed out to meet her as she stepped inside. She paused at the doorway, as if unsure she was truly welcome. Then she nodded softly and whispered, "Thank you." He gave her a blanket and pointed to a chair near the fire. She sat slowly, stretching her hands toward the flames. The light revealed her face more clearly now, lines of hardship, but also quiet strength. Thomas poured her a cup of warm broth without saying much. Words felt unnecessary. After a while she spoke. Her name was Ayana. She was traveling to find her sister, who had married and moved west. Ayana had lost her husband to sickness the year before. Since then, the road had been her home, and kindness had become rare. "Most doors stay closed," she said gently. "People see my face and decide I am trouble." Thomas stared into the fire. "People see my silence and think I have no heart," he replied. They shared a small, sad smile. As the storm raged outside, something peaceful settled inside the cabin. The fire cracked and popped. The wind howled, but it couldn't reach them. Thomas laid out a simple bed near the hearth for Ayana and took his own chair across the room. "You can sleep," he said. "I'll keep the fire going." She hesitated again. "You're very kind," she said. "You didn't have to help me." Thomas shrugged. "Maybe I did." In the quiet hours of the night, Thomas couldn't sleep. Memories surfaced. The night his wife had begged him to stay home instead of riding out in a storm. The night he came back to a cold house and a life forever changed. He wondered how many times kindness could have altered a path, if only someone had chosen it sooner. Near dawn, Ayana stirred. She rose quietly, folded the blanket, and placed it neatly on the chair. When Thomas looked up, she was standing by the door. "I should go," she said softly. He nodded, then surprised himself by asking, "Where will you go?" She smiled, hopeful but uncertain. "I will keep walking, but tonight gave me strength." Thomas reached into a small tin on the shelf and pulled out some dried meat and bread. He handed it to her, for the road. Her eyes filled with tears. "You don't know what this means." He met her gaze. "I think I do." Before leaving, Ayana paused and placed a small carved stone on the table. It was smooth and warm from her hand. "For protection," she said, "and for remembrance." Then she stepped into the early light and disappeared into the white horizon. Days passed, then weeks. Winter slowly loosened its grip. Thomas carried on with his routine, but something inside him had shifted. The cabin felt less empty. He found himself leaving the door unlocked during daylight, just in case someone else needed help. One afternoon, a rider from town stopped by. He brought news that surprised Thomas. A native woman had arrived safely at a settlement west of the river. She spoke of a cowboy who saved her life by opening his door on the coldest night of winter. Thomas said nothing, but after the rider left, he picked up the small carved stone. He held it tightly, feeling warmth spread through his chest, not from the fire but from something long forgotten. Spring came early that year. Grass pushed through melting snow, birds returned, and one morning Thomas noticed something new inside himself, a desire to live, not just survive. Kindness had not erased his pain. It hadn't changed the past, but it had given his grief a purpose. It reminded him that even broken hearts could still offer shelter. Somewhere out there, Ayana was walking her own path, carrying the memory of a warm cabin and a man who chose compassion over fear. And Thomas, once closed off from the world, had learned that opening a door could also open a soul. The truth is, kindness doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it arrives as a knock in the night, asking for nothing more than warmth and understanding. And when we choose to answer, we don't just change someone else's life, we change our own. So when the world feels cold and fear tells you to stay shut inside, remember this story. Open the door, share what you can, be the warmth someone else is praying for. Because kindness, even in the smallest moment, can light a fire that lasts a lifetime.